evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
Greetings, family, and welcome to another version of the Rock Newman Show 2.0. And do we have a great one for you here now? I want to introduce a brother who has been in the struggle for a very long time, and he's not weary. He continues. I speak of none other than Dr. Professor Ron Daniels, who is now the president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. Dr. Daniels, my brother, welcome to the Rock Newman Show 2.0.
Oh, I am so glad to be back with you, brother, in terms of 2.0, and I'll be ready for 3.1 and 4.5, whatever it is, whatever Rock Newman calls, you know, I'm ready to go, given your history and the work that you've done over the years, setting such an exemplary example for our people in terms of a Black professional using your talent and skill to promote Black people. So, you know, I'm always just so excited to chat with you, to chop it up, and to, you know, we will sit here and strategize. By the time we finish, we will have solved the great issues confronting Black people all over the world.
Let's go for it. So, Ron, before we get into, you've got some things that are happening over these next few months that are critically important throughout the diaspora. And I really want to give time to, you know, your projects, what you are doing, your assessment of the state of Black America. But I live here now in the state of Florida, and, you know, I can't help but when I'm flipping through the radio dial and looking at the newspaper to see the name DeSantis.
Yes.
And I am sickened when I see his face. I'm sickened when I hear his name. So when I put his name down this morning to ask you about him and this whole idea of trying to erase the teaching of Black history, I put his name down, but I wrote next to it, and 18 other states also. Just prior to addressing him, I'm going to ask you the question. Did you by any chance see the State of the Union and then Sarah Huckabee Sanders' reaction to the State of the Union?
I saw the State of the Union address. I did not see Sarah Huckabee Sanders' response to it, but I did see a clip of it afterwards. But I mean, you can almost anticipate what it is that will be said, because we if you understand the era that we're in, then we understand what DeSantis is all about. We understand what indeed, you know, the MAGA mad movement is all about. Inspired by the Orange Man. I don't call him by name. It's either the Orange Man or AKA Agent Orange, as Spike Lee talked about it. This is Black History Month, and it's really sacrilege that DeSantis would do what he is doing in Black History Month. But for these people, it does not matter. Dr. John Henry Clark told us, he warned us, and Dr. John Henry Clark, one of the great teachers, one of the great scholars of all time, he put it this way: white nationalism is the enemy of Black nationalism. And what he really meant by that white nationalism is the enemy of Black people. And what we are seeing unfolding is one of the great struggles. And indeed, Biden is right about this. And he's right about what Martin Luther King said. When he was at Ebenezer Baptist Church, he referenced Dr. King. And he said, Dr. King was about Black people, yes, but he had a broader goal. He said, redeeming the soul of America. Well, what is underway is a struggle for the heart and soul of America. And that means it's also a struggle for the heart and soul of Black people. Because at the end of the day, what white nationalism attempts to do, and they are seriously organized, is to maintain this country as a white man's land. As, by the way, was written into the Constitution of the United States of America when we were written as three-fifths of a human being.
I identified you as professor. I want you to teach, brother.
And indeed by the decision which declared that a white man having the black man, there was no rights that a black man had that white people were bound to obey. That was laid out very clearly in that Supreme Court decision. And even at the very beginning, and people overlook this, and when I teach my classes, I start with this whole proposition that America was intended to be a white man's land. My students think I'm being provocative, radical, and crazy. But I said, I will do as Malcolm said. I will present documented evidence. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the actual writings that were etched into the Constitution of the United States and provisions in 1793, where they talked about, in fact, explicitly maintaining citizenship for white people. They say it. Then they go on with the Chinese Exclusion Act and the California Land Act. Over and over again, they say openly, this country is to be for white people, right? And so what we're seeing now is, having been driven underground, during the period of the civil rights movement and thereafter, there were always people who were alluding to it. There were always, and Jesse Jackson talked about it. He said we have people who are in the blue suits and the white robes and and the white sheets, so to speak. They were disguising it. But along comes Agent Orange, the Orange Man, and he brings into the open and into the open the MAGA forces, who were not voting, by the way. They were on the sideline, but they found their candidate, and they have seized control of the Republican Party, and they are advancing unapologetically a white nationalist agenda. I mean, who would have imagined, when you look at, in fact, how the Trump administration unfolded? I mean, he had someone, his principal advisor was a white nationalist. He still had Stephen Smith. Stephen, I forget his last name. Stephen was still there at the end as a white nationalist. And so all of a sudden, white nationalism and this whole idea of cancer culture became clear. So the danger is, of course, that they are fearful that somehow or another, if people learn the real history, that somehow Black people will retaliate and will turn on them and so forth, which is not our history and which is not our background at all. But what it really will happen is, it will in fact empower not only Black people, but the true telling of history in terms of Black studies is about talking about what really happened in America. And what that does, not only will it embolden Black people, there's a certain number of white people who in fact will rise up and say, we didn't know what was really happening. We didn't really know what happened in history. And so that's the real clash. And you have someone like DeSantis, who is a MAGA Orange Man wannabe. That's what he is. He's a wannabe. He wannabe president. And to see wannabe president, he will do anything. They will do anything. They have no principle. They're hypocrites.
No North Star whatsoever.
They're dangerous. They're dangerous. Steve Bannon is the person I was about to refer to, who was actually in the White House. Imagine if Obama had an avowed person in his cabinet that was a Black supremacist. We don't have such a thing, but suppose he did. Yeah. I mean, you had people who just spoke up in the Obama administration and said some lightweight stuff, and they got dismissed. And here you have outright white nationalists.
Obama had the nerve to wear a tan suit, and they were outraged. Ron, let me say something there. So very early in, I call him POS 45. One might be able to figure out what that means. Early into his administration, maybe like a week later. So there was a photo of POS 45 and Bannon. And I positioned on Facebook to say that here is a classic example and a simple one of white supremacy. And I said, and I put a photo of Reverend Jeremiah Wright,
Right.
and Minister Farrakhan.
Right.
And I said, if Obama would have had either of these people who have neither of them have ever been accused of any kind of harm, neither of that, if Obama had thought about having them to the White House, he would have been run out of town.
No question.
And here you've got Steve Bannon, who came out of that Breitbart filth and degradation.
No question.
And he is a senior advisor parading around the White House with his 3 or 4 shirts on. It's been rumored that he was trying to cover body funk. I don't know what it is, but he certainly looks like funky. He might be real funky. And I said it. But look, so I want to get to something.
Yeah, but let me tell the audience. Let me just no, Rock. Let's just I just want to expand on what you said, because we need to drive that point home.
That's the biggest, most viral thing that I ever did. It was
because the person I was mentioning is Van Jones, who was a cabinet member, said something, just made a mild criticism of some organization.
Yeah.
He didn't, it wasn't even a racial thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Obama had to leave the administration.
Right.
Obama actually, the brother did what he thought he had to do, and I don't like what he did. He threw Reverend Jeremiah his pastor, under the bus.
Yeah.
Actually, right? In order to make sure he was purified, and he was, in a sense, he was inoculated. But that is the danger. That is what's happening. By the way, let me just say this. Historically, let's be clear that the roots of this did not begin with Trump.
Right.
With the Orange Man.
Definitely.
We remember Reagan going actually to the place where Swarna Goodman and Cheney were murdered.
In Mississippi,
the signal to white Nazi. That's the polite way they did it. Mm-hmm. I'm with y'all. You understand? Mm-hmm. Because that's where George Wallace and so forth. We remember that Nixon had a Southern strategy. Mm-hmm. We remember the Tea Party movement and so forth. So all of this was kind of was insinuated. The difference is, and in some way it's good, Trump just took the covers off of it and said, here it is, raw, naked, white nationalism. And he galvanized and got people behind him, and they voted for him, and he became president of the United States. It is an Academy Award of the 21st century that he was able to fool a whole lot of people into that. But it's dangerous, and it is a struggle for the heart and soul of this country. But at the end of the day, as Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. What we have to do is bend it. Our task is not to sit back and watch it. It's to recognize what it is and then be prepared to stand up and fight righteously and justly to make not only to save ourselves, as we will do and must do, but at the end of the day, we are the secret sauce that in fact will ultimately save the United States of America and in fact step out, as Dr. Karenga said, on the world stage as free, proud, and productive people.
Ron, I just want to stay with this a moment further. I felt in my high school years in the late 60s, and then in my college years at Howard University, 70 to 74 was my class. I wasn't a good enough student to graduate on time. It took me a couple more years, but I finally got that degree. I felt a sense of hopelessness, of hope. I felt a sense of hope. There had been the struggle, the civil rights struggle. There had been the murder of, John Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. They had been gunned down. But nevertheless, there was a sense of hope that we were heading in the right direction. And I will say that it felt like for several years after that, we were heading in the right direction. And sort of the culmination of that, my thinking of it the right direction, was the election of Barack Hussein Obama. When that happened, there were those who started to talk about America as a colorblind. It's an example of America now being a colorblind society. I would often push back, whether it was publicly or privately, that was not the case. That beautiful, beautiful Black family sitting in the White House,
right?
And as far too many people think the white people's house drove white people
crazy
towards insanity.
That's right.
There was I'm a country boy and used to have to go get firewood, and the firewood smolders for a while, and then it erupts into flames. And as you said, the orange one poured the gasoline. He just poured gasoline on it. With you having run and actually being a central figure in the presidential runs of Jesse Jackson, and obviously being an acute observer of the state of America for these years, do you find that assessment fairly correct?
Yeah, I think it's correct. I would make this addendum, and that is the whole notion of race neutral actually preceded, and I'll tell you why, and I'll refresh your memory on that. But the bottom line is that the whole idea of a Black family in the White House, as you said, it drove a whole lot of white folks crazy. And as you recall, gun sales, the rise of militias, all of this began to explode because they could not take the idea that somehow or another a Black family would be in the White House. And by the way, it's bigger than that, because I'm telling you, the Naturalization Act of 1793, I think it is what I was about to quote. I missed it at the beginning. The Naturalization Act of 1793 it talks about preserving this country as a white man's land. And so it's Black folks, but they nervous about brown people. They nervous about red people. They're nervous about yellow people. They want to keep America white. They're afraid of the browning of America. And they also talk about it in terms of losing their culture. The whole notion of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture is at stake. So
take our country back.
Yeah, take our country back. Our country back, right? Not understanding that to the degree that this has any possibilities, the our includes us now, and we ain't going nowhere. Now, we will identify with Africa. We ought to identify Africa. Africa is the base of global Black power, no question about it. But we have some skin in this game. You know what I mean? We got some blood, sweat, and tears in this game. The national anthem spells it out in terms of where we've trod and where we've come from. In that regard. And so the one addendum I would say is that even in the era when you go back to our friend Doug Wilder, who won the governorship of Virginia, or Norm Rice who became mayor of Seattle, even they began to talk in terms of what they called race neutral politics, which was a mistake, by the way.
Yes.
See, we should not be in a situation where we have to abandon who we are as a basis for getting elected.
Right.
I mean, for example, Nikki Haley just announced that she is running for president of the United States. And what you find is, by the way, if you do that, then you will be accepted by white nationalists. See, white nationalists will accept black folk as long as you are denouncing who you are as a person. They love Clarence Thomas,
Mhm.
because he has embraced their perspective on the world, which is why we can't be confused. If somebody put it very simply, all skin folk ain't kin folk. You
Mhm.
know, as Charles Barron from up here, revolutionary in office, often says, you know, there's a difference between being cosmetically black and authentically black. So beyond skin color, it's the content of the politics, it's the content of what it is you stand for that identifies you as being really black. And so with people like Nikki Haley, they have essentially disavowed themselves. I heard a clip the other day, and she basically said that she subdued her Indianness. And quite frankly, in a scenario like that, the white supremacy will adopt people like that. And so many of the Indians have become honorary white people. So you had a governor of Louisiana before you had a black person be governor of Louisiana, because that person was willing to become a right-wing spokesperson and advocate. So therefore they were willing to adopt them. We must never, ever forget that. So at the end of the day, when we look at the Obama administration, was it progress? Yes, it was progress. Have we made progress? Yes. I mean, when if I was in Youngstown, Ohio, and we used to go cross the Mason-Dixon line in Cincinnati, everything changed. You had to, you know, my father had that blue steel 38 Smith and Wesson up under the seat. You know, we had to figure out where we could stop and get something to eat. And I mean, segregation was there. We don't have to do that anymore. So we made progress along those lines. But what we must never forget is that we have not yet erased structural institutional racism. The fact that Indira Gandhi or others who are women have been able to be elected to heads of state, and I'll use Indira Gandhi as the first woman in India, did not mean that sexism had disappeared. It is still deeply embedded. The same thing is here. Because there are black people who are able now to be elected does not mean that structural institutional racism has been rooted out. It has not. And it will not ultimately be rooted out until this country has reckoned, in fact, with one of its original sins, one of which have been the dispossession of Native people, which we must never forget. We are here because of the dispossession of Native people. The other original sin is, of course, enslavement and all of its legacies. And that will only be repaired when we deal with the fundamental question of repair by way of reparations. So you're on track. Your analysis is correct. And yes, we had optimism, and we should still have optimism, because when Jesse Jackson says keep hope alive, what he's saying is a hopeless people are not a people who struggle. You struggle when you have hope. That's why he says keep hope alive. And of course, Black Lives Matter, movement for Black lives. There are all kinds of forces that are out here who are keeping hope alive. The most important part about it, however, is to be organized, to be strategic, and in fact, to be relentless, you know, in terms of moving forward on our agenda.
Ron, yours is a voice. Yours is a voice that is so continuously needed, and it brings me right into my next point before I get into the exciting, important, critical things that you've got planned over the next few months, and that is the issue of reparations. Yeah, you just mentioned repair.
Right.
What is and so the question, what is he talking about repair? Well, when you have over time, through your actions, through one's actions and through their policies, severely damaged a people. I mean, I cannot think of uh, a greater need for, first, rigorous national introspection that investigates yourself
Right.
and your history that they're trying to whitewash out of books, as we said at the beginning, to acknowledge, to recognize, and to acknowledge the deep, deep, deep damage
Right.
that you've done. Make say I'm sorry.
Right. Right.
And then and then repair. And what
Absolutely.
does repair mean? Repair means reparations for the century of damage that is so verifiable, so easily verifiable. They fight so hard not to have people to become aware of that, and fight so hard against reparations because it has to be an acknowledgement of wrong. I want to ask you this question because within the Black community, some people that I've had on my show speak of, when you talk about reparations, to some, they don't want to bring into that subject Pan-Africa, the concept of being Pan-Africanist. It's like descendants of slaves in America.
Right.
They're plenty of American slaves.
Right.
Can you kind of help us out with that? I want to hear your seasoned thought on the foregoing.
Right, and that's why we have established, and we want people from your incredibly conscious audience, because see, the key thing is to have the debate, have the discussion, right? And you have an incredibly very conscious audience, so we want people to go to ibw21.org, ibw21.org, because we have a National African American Reparations Commission. Why did we establish that? So that we would have an authoritative group, a body of people who are scholars, activists, faith leaders across the board, who have been doing this work for a long time, and who therefore are an authoritative voice to answer the kinds of questions that you have laid out. We have some newer voices that are on the scene, and that's a good thing, because what that says is the cross-generational struggle for reparations keeps growing and keeps developing. And so new people are coming upon the scene, and they're injecting themselves, and they have ideas and whatever. But in reality, what happens is you can't come into the arena and change the rules. You can't change the definitions of things. Reparations is by definition for African Americans. Let me just say from the beginning, reparations for Africans in America or African Americans are due for enslavement, the Holocaust of enslavement. That is the most egregious harm against humanity ever, in terms of the enormity of the millions of people over centuries that were ripped from the African continent, and indeed fundamentally the wealth of the Western world, as documented by Walter Rodney, and even before him Sir Eric Williams in his book Capitalism and Slavery. Walter Rodney's is in some ways a more easier read. It's clearer how Europe underdeveloped Africa. The wealth of Barclays Bank and Lloyd's of London and corporations. But even in this country, the triangular trade produced huge wealth off of the backs of Black free labor. So we are due reparations for that. But we're also due reparations for all of the legacies of enslavement. It doesn't stop just with enslavement. All of the legacies, the Homestead Act, Claude Anderson, black labor, white wealth, all of the benefits that went to white folks, even up to the present, where these corporations benefited from getting land, and even many white folks benefited from it. And that's the other thing that people have to understand. In some way or another, all white people benefited from enslavement. Now, they didn't benefit equally, because there's a class dynamic in a racialized capitalist society. The big white folks got more than the little white folks. But if you understand what I'm saying, and I go back to the classroom, and this is the basic stuff, I tell my students, let's simplify. You don't have to understand everything. There's something called a multiplier effect and the acceleration principle, right? If in fact you engaged in if there's a slave trafficking going on, you don't have to be the slave trader. Somebody's building them ships and them sails and so forth, and you're getting hired in those industries as a result of that. So you benefited, right? Now, the people who own the shipbuilding company will make most of those dollars, but I digress. And so when you look at the Homestead Act, for example, white folks got land. Big railroads got a whole big chunk of it. Other folks got small parts of it. There are land grant colleges built off of the Homestead Act. We did not get that. We were racially excluded from the Homestead Act. We went off to fight in America's wars. And Black people who fought in the American wars as our most patient patriots did not get the GI Bill. Medgar Evers gave his life. He did not get the GI Bill. They talk about this home and the castle and all this stuff, the suburbs, the fair, and the FHA, Fair Housing Administration, built the suburbs. Black people were excluded from that. And then you have the phenomenon of redlining and urban renewal. We call it the Negro Removal Program of the 21st century. They just shot up through our communities, prosperous communities that we built. We built with our own hands, our own labor. And then we also had communities destroyed like Tulsa, Black Wall Street, the Greenwood District. So we're due reparations for all of those things. And so we have communities. Oh, and the war on drugs. The war on drugs was a war, and Michelle Alexander in her new Jim Crow documented it beyond question, documented evidence. It was a war on us. And so what we see is, therefore, that Black people who came to this country came from everywhere. They didn't just come from one source. They came from every source and every place. And today, right up to the present, when you have people who are coming into these communities, you're coming into communities that are still under the gun in relationship to redlining, gentrification, and police terror. So when Abner Louima, who was actually, tortured by the police in New York, they did not ask him whether he was Haitian or not. When Amadou Diallo was gunned down and murdered, they didn't ask him whether he was from Guinea or not. What Malcolm said is, we all catch hell for the same reason. We catch hell because we're Black people. Therefore, the Pan-African proposition. How do you tell El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz and Malcolm X, whose family is from the Caribbean, that their descendants are not warranting reparations? How do you tell Mr. Deo, Mr. Harry Belafonte that he's not entitled? Or Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, he's not entitled? Or Shirley Chisholm? It is an absurd proposition that really has a Black anti-nativist aspect of it. So I respectfully disagree with the people from ADOS. And by the way, they need to learn how to behave themselves, because if you check out how they behave themselves, they're nasty, they talk bad about people, they denigrate people personally and all that. That is not a good thing. There's some suspicion, by the way, that not only do they do that, that it's really a right-wing inspired thing, because they also tell people not to vote. If you don't do this, you should not vote, which is a way of suppressing the Black vote. And that's a more controversial proposition. But the answer is, we are Pan-Africanists because we're all in this together. And let me just finally say this. Why would I leave anything on the table? You know what I mean? If they have exploited us in all these ways, why would I just restrict it to one particular era? And that is the era of enslavement. I'm leaving reparations dollars on the table. So what we say, based on some very brilliant thinking by Cam Howard, who's a former male co-chair in COBRA, now with Reparations United, we in the National African-American Reparations Commission say all Black people harmed in America, by America, must be repaired by America in America. That means all of us. Now, we might, in the midst of doing that, as we talk about reparations, we may have some criteria by which some may, if you have a certain income, so therefore maybe you don't need it and all that. But it will not be on the basis of you were from the Caribbean. Or as they did, they attacked Kamala Harris because they said, well, Kamala Harris should not be eligible for reparations. She's the original co-signer of the reparations bill in the Senate. And they're telling her family would not be eligible. So we just have to push back. And when people understand that you're trying to restrict reparations to a narrow group of people. And then, by the way, how are you going to tell? Now they're going to get out that they're going to do a blood test. Now we got to give up some blood. Then they're going to go back and try to trace it. I mean, come on. We are not going to do that.
Folks, you're listening to Professor Dr. Ron Daniels. He's the president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. His organization has a program, 5 days of activity in Baltimore, Maryland. He's having a international town hall meeting on the state of Black America and the Pan-African world. So, Ron, I want to ask you several questions. The first is, why have you convened this conference?
Well, I mean, the Institute of the Black World 21st Century actually, this is number 5. So it is the town hall meeting you reference is just one aspect of an overarching State of the Black World Conference. We began actually with the development of IBW and 20. Actually, we had a series of State of the Race conferences too, which is why we're returning to Baltimore 1994, 1997. And then in 2001, actually, we were attempting, I like to refresh people's memory by going back to historical dates. So we wanted to remind people of the Congress of African People, which was convened in 1970. We didn't quite have the resources to do that, so we actually convened the first State of the Race, State of the World, Black World Conference in Atlanta in 2001. And it was a result of us coming together to talk about the fact that we needed kind of a new kind of think tank. Because going back to what you talked about, you had an organization called the Joint Center, which was a great organization, but they were even talking about race neutral politics. Well, we said, well, no. We're not going down no race neutral path. We respectful, we understand what you're trying to say, but we need to be talking about race conscious policy, not race neutral policy. Yeah. And so we thought we needed something that would be a reflection of that. Now, of course, the first IBW was put together by Vincent Harding, brilliant brother. Haki Madhubuti, Lerone Bennett Jr.'s work, The Challenge of Blackness, contributed to it, as well as a number of other people, including our brother Walter Rodney. It was an incredibly powerful instrument. They put it to bed for reasons I won't go into all the details of it. We wanted to resurrect it and to give it a slightly different focus in terms of being more action oriented. So that happened in 2001, and in 2002, on my 60th birthday, we declared to create the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. One of the largest things that we do is every 4 years, we have an assessment of, after the election, after presidential elections, what is the state of Black America in the Pan-African world? And then we have a series of result-oriented, issue-oriented working sessions, not just sessions to complain about the analysis and whatever, but to figure out how do we move forward. So we've had 4 of those, the last of which was in Newark, New Jersey, hosted by the Honorable Raj J. Baraka in 2016. So this is number 5, which is actually postponed because of COVID, right? And so this one is the largest one of them all, Rock. This is the crown jewel, really, of my legacy. IBW is my legacy. This is what I have worked on. And let me just talk about the principle of what this is. Very simple. I believe, just as we're chopping up now, we don't need outside anybody. We are each other's best teachers and learners. Yeah. We got some of the most brilliant, bright minds. And it doesn't mean you have to have a degree. Your lived experience means something to Black people. We have assets. And when we share those assets with each other and we collaborate with each other, then that's strength. And so we talk about cultivating a culture of collaboration to heal and empower Black communities, Black families, communities, and nations. So,
Ron, I don't have any doubt your explanation of the why motivates my viewership, my listening audience, to want to get involved, to want to participate. So let's do something very fundamental. How can my viewers, how can the listeners, how can they participate? What should they do? What's the information? And then I've got some questions. That's not the end of this interview, but I want to put that out there now. How can we all participate?
But we say all roads lead to Baltimore, April 19th through the 23rd, for the State of the Black World Conference number 5, the theme of which is Global Africans Rising, Empowerment, Reparations, and Healing. The honorary chairman is none other than Dr. Julius Garvey. Dr. Julius Garvey is the son of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We have 5 days. Among other folk, we have invited the president of Ghana. We've invited the prime minister of Barbados, the first African-American, the first Black woman to be prime minister of Barbados. We have invited the first Afro-descended vice president of Colombia that has other than Brazil, the largest population, Francio Marquez to be there, and many, many others. And Danny Glover, a whole bunch of folk are going to be there. But we want all of you to come and be there. So the way to check it out is to go to the website, ibw21.org, ibw21.org, and you will see 5 days of incredible issue-oriented work that is going to be done. And it cannot be done effectively without the participation, of our Black folk coming from this country, and people are coming from all over the world. And of course, I'm publicly, we got that town hall meeting. I know you got some other stuff you want to do, but Dr. Julianne Malvo is one of the co-facilitators of that town hall meeting we talked about. And I'm publicly, Laurie, I have a draft Rock Newman movement. We want you to be the other co-hosts so you can ask these African leaders and people from all over the world, what is the state of Black America and the Pan-African world? IBW21.org, all roads lead to Baltimore, April 19th through the 23rd.
Ron, that's first of all, that draft rock movement is very flattering. Thank you for that. I'm going to be making every effort to try to facilitate that request. Here's what I want to stay with this though, and have you to enumerate. I've obviously seen some of the literature, but I would like for you to highlight 9 particular areas. And what I like to do with this show is give the time to really get into and again, let the viewer be aware of the issues and the areas that you're going to be covering in those 5 days.
And so there are 8 issues and 1 institute, and there'll be a Pan-African Institute that's always convened by Danny Glover as our honorary chair. He's always there to do it. He's already confirmed to be there this time, as well as P.J. Patterson, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, longest serving Prime Minister there, but also a global statesman. So that Pan-African Institute, and then we have the following areas: environmental justice, climate change, and water as a human right. We're going to be tackling that question. We know what's happening. We know what happened in Jackson, Mississippi. We know what happened in Flint, Michigan. We know what happened in Newark, New Jersey. It's happening all over the country. Black people are being poisoned, but it's greater than that. We've got to be dealing with climate change because climate change affects us. And so that is one of the major areas that we're going to be covering. We're going to be dealing with the question of displacing Black people and Black culture. Gentrification as a state of emergency in Black America. Our communities are being taken over by market forces, supposedly for good purposes, but they're driving us out of our communities. This will be one of the centerpieces that we will be taking up. Socially responsible Black business and economic development. Got to have that as a part of our criteria. We need an economic base in our community. That'll be a track. Then, of course, one of the most troubling areas is combating gun violence, murders, and fratricides in Black communities, a public health crisis. In other words, we got to look at this as a public health crisis and treat it as such. And so that's going to be a major, major track as well. And then reimagining public safety and law enforcement. We cannot go along with the current system as is. We need to abolish the current criminal injustice system and replace it with one that has less of a footprint, that is less engaged in our lives, and reimagines how we do this. And we have to be in a position to control actually what happens in our community. And then we have one called Making Black Lives Matter. In fact, Black Lives Matter is going to be facilitating this, Black Lives Matter grassroots. And then we have building the U.S. and global reparations movement. That's going to be one of the major centerpieces. And then finally, the role of hip hop in the Black freedom struggle. So let me just quickly tell you how this works. Each of those sessions will have an airing before the whole body. But then, Rock, what we do is we only allow you to pick one. You choose one. Why? Because on Saturday, we have 3 2.5-hour sessions in which we take a deep dive. So you have a much more qualitative experience. And one of the things I always push is everybody who comes is a resource person. You don't have to have no degree and all that. You have lived experience. You bring that to the table and you share it. But what we're looking at is not just the grievance or not just the analysis. Even if you tried to do something and failed, what did you learn from it? And how do you share that? And then people are going to be there to say, well, if you try this, try that. And we're going to have models of actually people who are succeeding, are doing real great things, or are building out movements to address issues so that you can be a part of it. So that's what makes this such a powerful, great conference. And by the way, we surround that with spirituality and religion and culture. You know what I mean? You feel you bathing in blackness when you come up to a State of the Black World Conference. And it's, everybody's there across the spectrum. People like Mark Morial of the Urban League, and then you have people coming from across the political spectrum. All Black people are welcome to be at Baltimore for the State of the Black World Conference. It will be phenomenal. And of course, we want people to rush to get there. Go to the website so you can sign up and register. There is a discount registration now. After a certain date, that registration will go up. We'll have an African village there in which, you'll have products from all over the world and whatever. And so those are the issue areas that we're going to be addressing, and they're very crucial.
Ron, please, one more time, if you would let the audience know how they can get in touch and get all the information surrounding this conference.
Yes, IBW 21, the numeral 21.org. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter. Because when you sign up for the newsletter, you'll be getting the bulletins. You'll be getting the bulletins about what's happening. We're sending them out now. We have one out now saying George Frazier is the one who's going to be dealing with economic development. Ron Hampton, who's an expert in police issues, is handling that particular area. These are not also necessarily famous names, but they're people who know how to get the work done. Gentrification. There's a brother named Damian Goodman. He's what they're trying to just take the Crenshaw district over. They just try to chop it up.
Yeah.
They have a Crenshaw subway coalition that's trying to purchase a whole mall and all that. Then this brother's with that. You have Asada Richards, who's from Houston, Texas, who has the Sankofa Institute. So you will see the names of the people who are convening these sessions as well.
Ron, I found Dr. Julius Garvey to be a fascinating, wonderful brother. I actually had the honor of hosting him on my show here. I know without a shadow of a doubt that the man who said, "Up ye mighty people," Marcus Garvey, would be very proud of what you're doing. And I am very proud to have been able to host you today. Thank you so much for all you've done and all you continue to do. Folks, that wraps us for this segment of Rock Newman Show 2.0. Professor Ron Daniels, again, thank you. And I look forward to hosting you again.
Thank you. My privilege.
God bless. Folks, that's it. Check it out. All roads lead to Baltimore. We're out.